Hi, I'm Colton with Still Rhythm Guidance, and in this episode or series, I want to be talking about the Brahma Viharas, the infinite abodes. These are four mental qualities that we can bring into our meditation practice. They're central in meditation practice. We're going to talk about why. We're going to talk about the other aspects of formal meditation practice that they affect. And particularly, we're going to be talking about a specific sutta that gives a really cool, really interesting perspective on the Brahma Viharas and on how they can have an effect on us. It also provides a really cool framework with which to view them, viewing them in sort of an ascending order, how they affect each other, how they build off one another, very similarly to the seven factors of enlightenment or seven factors of awakening, the Sata Bhujangas, these states that we steadily deepen down into in our practice, which lead to insight, vipassana, states of awakening or realization. So let's dive into it. The sutta in question that we're talking about is from the Samyutta Nikaya. It is mentioned in the Visuddhimagga. It is mentioned in the Visuddhimagga as the Halidavasana Sutta, and that is because in circa 400 or something like that, about 1,000 years after the Buddha's passing, the Visuddhimagga was written by Bhaddantacharya Buddhaghosa. And in that, he cites this sutta as being the Halidavasana Sutta because that's a town in which this sutta took place. If you want to find the actual sutta and reference this yourself, it's called the Metta Sahagata Sutta. And that sutta is in the Samyutta Nikaya. It's sutta number 46, verse 54. So, in this sutta, Buddha is talking about, in our meditation practice, cycling through the seven factors of awakening and coloring that cycle with each of the Brahma Viharas. Now, a little bit of framework on them. These mental states, the Brahma Viharas, if you don't already know, they are loving kindness or metta in Pali, compassion or karuna, altruistic joy, which is a complicated translation, which we're definitely going to be talking about, mudita in Pali, and equanimity, sort of the real target achievement of all meditation practice, this state of balance of inner poise and solidarity, equanimity, which in Pali the term is upekkha. So these four states are essentially what we will be left with if we can, this is such a harsh term, eradicate the five kilesas or five negative modes of thinking or states of consciousness is the way I like to think about it, because it is a state of consciousness. It colors your entire perceptual matrix, the way you are interacting with your world, the way you are interacting with yourself, with your own mind, so your inner world and also with your outer world. Those five kilesas, pancha kilesa, also known as the five defilements of mind, again, very harsh terminology. We can be very soft about all these terms, and the so-called eradicating, which is not really an eradication. The whole premise of the Buddha's teachings is based on conditionality. So there's conditions for these five things to arise. Let's get into those for anybody viewing who's not familiar with them. The five kilesas, or poisons, or defilements of mind, these things that really take us out and away from the Brahma Viharas, which are these infinite abodes, these expansive, eternal mind states of loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity. They are restlessness, which manifest in so many ways. I don't want to get too deep into these, so I just want to give you the flavor. But they're very expansive. Look into them. You can reach out on our website. We have printouts of these and talk about them a little bit there if you want more on that. So we have restlessness, and we have its opposite, which is sloth, laziness, dullness of mind. You start nodding off in your meditation, or you're meditating and your mind is just going all over the place, restlessness and sloth. The other two that we have, which are sort of a dyad or a polarization in the mind that take place, is desire. So we can sit in meditation and be really hungry. I want a cup of tea. I want this. I want that. I'm hungry. I'm, yearningness taking place. And its opposite, which is aversion, dislike. I'm not happy here. I don't want to be here. My butt hurts. I have an ache in my back, or I'm angry at this person. So a little bit of restlessness with aversion can take place. A restless mind that can't slow down thinking about something it's irritated with. They can each kind of color each other. We can be restless about our desires, or we can be sort of dull in our desires. I just want to go to sleep. Or dull and I'm so angry at the world, and it's sucking all of my energy out of me. These are all conditioned. We can stop letting them get in our way and look at what's behind them, which is their conditions, and we can uproot those conditions, and this falls away. These are really a mirage. They really, really are. So there's four. The next one is the fifth, sort of the most impervious and the most subtle of these is doubt. We doubt what we're doing, we doubt ourselves, we doubt the practice, or we just kind of have an overall confusion in the mind, a muddled energy in the mind of not being clear. Because when we do get really clear about these things, they become obvious to ourselves. We can know these things in ourselves to be true. So overcoming these is sort of the whole focus of meditation practice, really, so that we can have what the Brahma Viharas are constantly, this equanimity, this equipoise, this balance in our lives, and also, these wholesome qualities of being compassionate, being loving, being kind, being good. I like to translate metta or loving kindness, because loving is such a heavy word. I like to just slide that right off the table and let it shatter. I think of metta as warm-heartedness, just being warm, calm, and just in your life, not oh, I'm so loving, I'm going to go out and love other people, because that's really not our aim in meditation. Our aim in meditation is to consolidate ourselves into ourselves and be who we want to be, not who everyone else wants us to be, which is a big danger of the translation of metta as the word loving kindness. We have to have an object for love, right? We really don't. We can just be loving, and the better way to term that, in my mind, is warm-heartedness. Just this, it's unafflicted. There's none of those five kileshas. There's no restlessness, there's no hatred, there's no sleepiness and warm-heartedness. Being warm-hearted and sort of, good in yourself gives you the energy of wakefulness. There's no desire because you're already satiated or satisfied, within yourself. And there's no doubt about the fact that this is a good mind state to be in. So there's our first one. Now, coloring the 7 factors of enlightenment, that's the whole topic in this sutta. We're going to get to our topic here at some point. Get our framework made up. Is coloring the 7 factors of awakening with each of these 4 Brahma Viharas or infinite mind states. Again, we have to regress. For those that are unfamiliar with what the 7 factors of awakening are, they're a systematic, I see them as a way of descending deeper and deeper into our practice. They really are, because they end in samadhi, and then, oddly enough, again, equanimity, which is one of the Brahma Viharas, which is why it's sort of at the top of the Brahma Vihara list, because it's like the meat and potatoes, and thus in our deepening in the 7 factors, it ends with equanimity. Again, this is our choice state, this is what we're aiming at, and that equanimity is achieved through the state of samadhi. Samadhi, which in other practices can be, and I find this a wonderfully helpful term to use for this enigmatic. I'm actually writing a very long blog on my website about what samadhi is, and I'm finding it horribly difficult. The Visuddhimagga spends 300 pages describing samadhi. So it's a task. There's volumes about samadhi. Anyways, a hypnagogic state I find to be a beautiful contrast for, what is samadhi. Learn about what a hypnagogic state is. It's this state that's subdued. It's in touch with the subconscious and the conscious. What we have when that happens, the Buddha's very explicit about, that's what I want for you when he's describing samatha or calm abiding. This is absolutely necessary. In the beginning of the Anapanasati Sutta, or Mindfulness of Breathing Sutta, the Buddha is saying, breathe in aware that you're breathing in, breathe out aware that you're breathing out, and become aware of your whole body as you're breathing, and now calm your body. And what we're doing by giving our attention to that is we're totally pulling ourselves out of any sort of mental workings, that restlessness, that aversion that's probably operating, because that's what's operating when we're in a conscious, wakeful state. When we're in a dream state, we've all had this experience. We can be in the middle of a horrible nightmare and still be kind of chill about it. We wake up kind of like, ooh, this was a dark dream. But now that I'm awake, it's like horrifying, where when I was dreaming, I was just kind of there in it. That's this energy of the hypnagogic state. We can bring all of our mental faculties to bear on something when our autonomic nervous system, when our freak out reactions are subdued. This isn't self-lobotomization. This is self-brilliance. This is self-manipulation, realizing I'm lesser than I can be when I'm not in a state of samatha, calm, when I'm not in a state of samadhi, concentration, focus, presence, when the hypnagogic state is very far from me. So this ability to subdue the self, to calm everything down, to get conscious and cognizant of what is taking place in our mind, in our inner world, that is affecting how we're interacting with our outer world. And this is affecting our lives. This is affecting who we are, what we're capable of doing, how much money we're capable of making, the kind of person that we are, want to be. Shame, guilt, self-hatred, suicide all come into play in all of these things. And I would know, because I've had all of these thoughts, feelings in myself. We all have. This is part of being human. The Buddha talks about that too. He talks about, the root of desire is sensual desires, and then the wanting to be something, some aspiration, and the wanting to not be this horrible person that we see ourselves, or just not wanting to exist at all. That's a craving. And it's like, we never escape these. We go back and forth like a mouse in a cage, So this is the nature of being human, is to have all of these experiences. And there's this brilliant ancient teaching in so many different flavors. The Buddha really distills it down to its absolute perfection of how do we work with these things. So, the 7 factors of enlightenment. We start with mindfulness. Mindfulness, Jack Kornfield describes mindfulness as kind and loving attention, I believe. Loving and kind attention. We'll start with that. The Buddha calls it careful attention or wise attention. Really being, intentionally present with what's going on. I would use my warm-hearted, presence with something, because that warm-heartedness, it just shifts the whole. We can be like really aware of something and really hate what we're being aware of, and that's not going to help us. So if we can disconnect, if we can, have some kindness first with it, and just a calmness, again, hypnagogic state, sinking down from this activated beta brain wave freak out mode, we're trying to slip down to alpha so that we can get some clarity about these things. So mindfulness is the first of the 7 factors of enlightenment. It initiates the other 7. we can envision mindfulness and then a column of 3 and 3, 6, and they balance each other. They also work in order, and I'm going to quote them off in the order that they're found in the Anapanasati Sutta, because Anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, the Buddha leads you from being mindful of your breath to the 4 foundations of mindfulness, being aware of these 4 aspects within our meditation practice, and then how the 4 foundations of mindfulness are actually naturally activating the 7 factors. And this is great because we can get so strewn out. This is a wonderful sutta. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. I don't have the sutta name right now, but you can go onto Sutta Central. Just look up Sutta Central. It's either .net or .com. You can look up any sutta. You can get the translations. There's 3 different translations, and you can even side-by-side it with the Pali and set it to where you can translate the Pali word. It's really beautiful if you want to do some really deep investigations into this stuff. Anyways, on Anapanasati Sutta, we don't feel it because there's so much subtlety in these practices. When we, are doing just mindfulness of the body or just mindfulness of feelings, we're not aware that just by directing our attention to that aspect of our experience, these 7 factors are naturally going to be lighting up one after the other as we steadily direct our attention to these. So one is the other. They're really the same thing. They're all just a different flavor, or seeing it from a different perspective of this amazing teaching that this Grandmaster left us. Mindfulness, as we're practicing mindfulness with whatever it is, our feelings, our body, our trauma, our mind, our wild thoughts, whatever it is, getting in touch with our dream state, just being aware of it. The mind naturally starts to investigate. The mind has thoughts. The mind is constantly relating all the different things. That's its natural function. Our natural function is to step outside of it and watch what it does. And then say, yes, that's wise, or no, that's not so wise. Thank you for, telling me that because I failed at my math test, I might as well be as horrible as, that awful neighbor that I had. But that's not actually a great simile that you've drawn for me, mind, brain. I'm going to not do that. But if we're not doing this mindfulness, then we are just as horrible as everyone because of these simple mishaps that we have in our lives. If we're not, initiating an oversight of our thoughts, then they're going to eat us alive. Of course we're going to be suicidal, right? These practices are so important. So the mind investigates. Mindfulness is initiated. It's the oversight of the rest. The next one in line is this investigation. Dhamma vichaya is the term in Pali. Sati is mindfulness, sati. So we become mindful. We start naturally investigating what's going on. And we do it from this place of unbiased calm, samatha. We have to always be calming, resettling our energy, a deep investigation of the limbic system, of what activates our autonomic nervous system. This is imperative for all meditation. You have to be able to self-soothe. And it's really easy because it's what every teacher says. They say, take a deep breath in and relax your whole body. Get really good at doing this. Relax your whole body. Drop your shoulders. Let your jaw loosen. Make sure you're not making any kind of facial expressions, and loosen all of the muscles in your face, because the nerves in your face, it's called the trigeminal nerve. It routes right into your thalamus, your amygdala, pain, fear centers, emotional centers. It routes straight into them. So your face reacts faster than your spinal cord, because it's the same thing. Your spinal cord, your nerves, your nervous system, your nerves feeling in your whole body, they route immediately to your face. And when you get aware of this, that's a way to, this sends fear in the face, but if you control your face, it has a backfeed loop that calms down the thalamus, that calms down your nervous system, that allows you to enter a deeper state of consciousness, unbiased state of consciousness, where the 5 panchakaleshas, the 5 defilements of mind, are not operating. As long as we're always keeping tabs on ourselves, okay, bring the energy down, calming, self-soothing, self-soothing. I think about this as skipping rocks. We expect ourselves to sit down and start meditating. We just threw a rock into a pond. We have to really, muster up our energy when we sit down to meditate and throw that rock just right so that it skips, so that we keep revisiting the surface. I need to calm, I need to calm, I need to calm. We want to get as many skips as we can to sit down and be like, okay, I'm going to breathe in and out and relax, and now it's all going to be great. It's not. It's just not. You're going to have to do it over and over again. And it becomes really wonderful because there's this steadiness, this rhythm, this stilling rhythm, a stilled rhythm. That's our name, can take place. It's a flowing system here. It's the function of mindfulness, is to be aware, to do that oversight, because these things will keep blipping up on our radar, and we want to keep softening around them as best we can and strengthen these mental muscles. As we investigate, as there's enough calm in our mindfulness to investigate, and we work on just that part first, investigation is taking place, right? And we can see why, we shouldn't let things get to us so much, or see all of our options. We can also see how these things function. And that's wildly complicated, really. It's too much to get into now, so subscribe and like, and we'll keep getting into all of this stuff. From this investigation, if we can consistently do this, if that investigation is steady and flowing and all of our gears are turning right, we haven't gotten to restless mind, we haven't gotten to obsessive mind, angry mind, desirous mind, if this stuff hasn't, thrown a fork in our gears, and we keep it flowing, then energy is going to arise in the body. This investigation requires energy, and our subconscious brain is going to be like, hey guys, we need to send energy to the brain, and we're going to get energy from doing this. And before you know it, you're meditating for like 4 hours, and you're like, wow, I feel really good, and I get this, like, I don't have to, like, you can, and it doesn't need to take 20 years. You just need to follow the precise stuff here. It's a map, it's a systematic map. Get familiar with it a little bit, have the faith, and really just always settling down is going to help you so much in this. So, investigation arouses energy. This is becoming a video about seven factors of awakening. I'm sorry, it's not supposed to, but that's what's going on so far. Anyhow, energy arises. We are going to get to the Brahma Viharas, I promise. Energy arises, and when we have this energy, we almost explained it, as I was talking about it, the rapture is right behind it, or joy, a feeling of like deep, wholesome pleasure, because, we're energized, we're stable, we have this mindfulness, we're investigating things, we're open and we're not closing down and turning away from our experience. That's another aspect of the description of sati, or mindfulness, in the Buddha calling it careful attention. Jack Kornfield calls it this loving present awareness, mindfulness. The opposite of that careful attention is to turn away, to try and get away from our experience. Now, if there's any shred of that, we're not going to get any deeper. So that's where compassion and kindness come in so important in this practice. Is you really have to have this noble human heart of, it's not this sappiness, it's this earnestness of like, I'm going to face this is what it is to be me, and I don't have to fall down about it and lament it. Like, yes, feel the lamentation, but just keep breathing it. Just keep breathing it, stay with it, and develop, it's such a tender place that can callous a little bit. I'm not sure if that's the right way to say it, because we don't want to become numb to these things, but we do develop a tolerance for them. So, blah, blah, blah. Energy to now rapture. That rapturous good feeling is immediately starting to saturate our whole, literally, body neurochemical system with tranquility. Passaddhi. That's the next in the list. We become really tranquil. We go from feeling really good to now we're just like, now we're there, and we're not going to get it by avoiding. We have to go through, and then we get it, and then we get tranquil. This is description of a hypnagogic state of samadhi, and that's the next one, is from this tranquility, the mind sort of is like, oh, and then it can just laser beam on stuff, and that is samadhi. The Visuddhimagga describes samadhi first in the chapter that begins 300 pages of description on samadhi. Buddhaghosa says, to give a description of samadhi, there's too many variations to it. To try and describe them all would not help the reader. It would just cause more confusion. So we're not going to try, but we will go ahead and give a basic description, even though I just said that is kind of what he says, of just traditional baseline samadhi, because there's different faculties to samadhi, just as there are the hypnagogic state. And he says, suffice it to say, we'll go ahead and, succumb to go ahead to giving a description and say that samadhi is profitable unification of mind. Having a unified mind. And the profitable, I think we've, provided a pretty good framework here of what makes it profitable, is that, our mind is not being assailed by these things. And if, it is, then we're not there yet, actually. We might think we are, or we might be skipping on and off of it. We might be, our mind, and that's the thing, our mind can get distracted away from our aversions enough to get to this state, but then the minute that concentration contacts something that is reactive in us, and brings up aversion, it is a house of cards. Collapses. It is a house of cards. It's a very delicate system. We have to be aware of the structure and function of the whole system to get it stabilized, to have it work. Because we can go up and down and fall over constantly in these practices without understanding how these things flow, where the energy comes from, how it distributes, and what's needed to sustain it. So samadhi, concentration, this concentration born of an unbiased investigation, a willingness to turn towards and not turn away from, an energetic energy is wildly important in the Buddhist teaching. He talks about energy probably more than anything, rousing energy. It's, this determination in us. That's sort of what it is. Virya is the Pali term for energy. So samadhi, this concentration, it allows us to see everything we've just talked about very clearly and see that we have a choice. It allows us to access, and then once we've done this, we see, I have a choice, I can go to this. This is not conditioned by anything but me. I don't have to have money or a place or anything to do this. I can do this once I know how to do this. And from that, we realize this can be my reaction, and that gives us this gift of equanimity, the seventh factor of enlightenment, from which the Buddha says, you do all these, you can become enlightened. That's why they're called the seven factors of enlightenment, of awakening, of realizing something very deep. And there are layers and levels. It is a systematic, progressional thing, because we have to sift through every little subtlety of the things we turn away from until it's just a barely turning away. We deal with the big ones and it gets deeper, and it might sound like a lot of work, but trust me, as you do it, there's more joy, there's more pleasure, there's more tranquility, there's more peace of mind and heart, there's more love for ourselves, pride in ourselves, care for ourselves, and less holding on to ourselves, because of course self-identity comes in huge in this whole system. So as we practice the seven factors of enlightenment, as it is stated in the Metta Sahagata Sutta, or sutta in question, we can bring the energy of each of the Brahma Viharas to bear as we do this practice. And this is what the Buddha is primarily talking about in this sutta. So, when we initiate our mindfulness, we can do it from a warm-heartedness, let's say. especially if we're just being mindful of a room. Now, if we're trying to be mindful and present with a relationship with another human being, it might be wiser to have compassion colored by, have mindfulness colored by compassion, and thus our investigation colored by compassion, and thus energy of compassion arises. A joy in this compassion because of the strength of heart and will and our whole mental energy being compassionately oriented, etc., etc. So as we practice in these ways, there is a hierarchy, and this is what I really wanted to talk about, is this hierarchy that the Buddha's explaining in this sutta of loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, which we're getting to, and equanimity. So let's just look at loving kindness. It's the first, it's the initiatory. Each of these links to a successively higher state of the jhanic attainments. Jhana is another term. Jhana can be translated as mental absorption. It is essentially samadhi, and that's what Buddhaghosa is talking about in the Visuddhimagga. Is there's a lot of factors to it. There are 8 jhanic attainments, or 8 levels of jhana, 8 levels of samadhi, 8 levels of mental absorption or profitable unification of mind. And the deeper of these, the Buddha is relating them to the Brahma Viharas, and in, an order of magnitude. The base level is loving kindness or metta, this warm-heartedness, this benevolence or goodness. I think of it as just a gentle human nobility. He says that the benefit of practicing our meditation with that energy, practicing our meditation means developing 7 factors of enlightenment, or the 4 foundations of mindfulness, because they're kind of one and the same. It's just how you want to look at them. The benefit of this is that we arrive in a mind state that is beautiful. That is the culmination of loving kindness practice. Compassion lands us in a state the Buddha calls the base of infinite space. And this has a lot to do with the faculty of compassion, of a caring heart for the suffering of others and the suffering of self, is that when we're really doing this, we're in touch with the suffering of plants, which are everywhere. We're in touch with the suffering of insects getting smashed, of eating each other. What a terrifying world it would be to be in the insect world. Yeek. Animals, of course, people. We probably start with other humans, maybe 2 or 3 at first. Deepa Ma is a really incredible woman and a great teacher, a teacher of Guy Armstrong, a teacher of Carol Wilson and Sally Armstrong and Jack Kornfield and the whole all them. She said, and I learned this on a retreat with Guy Armstrong and his wife Sally, amazing teachers who I love so much. That Deepa Ma said this: as we're doing this practice, we're doing it right here. Eventually, as we're working with compassion, the natural ability of the mind, or the natural inclination of mind, as we were talking about earlier, to open up all possibilities, when we start seeding, because compassion gets right into our nervous system, and mostly our mind is saying, my owner does not want to be overwhelmed with emotion, so I'm going to not pay attention to these things. But when we are directing ourselves to it, the mind eventually this is kind of what Deepa Ma is saying in her own words, these are in my words, is that the mind is going to route, okay, I'm going to take this concept of compassion and map it on my entire universal view, and we're going to get hammered with this experience of all the suffering And we really need to get to equanimity with this. We really have to have deep samatha. We really have to have a deep warm-heartedness. We really have to have inner balance, or we're not going to get there. And if we don't get there, then we won't get to actual equanimity, which is later in the cycle. And this hammer to the heart, this sledgehammer on our psyche of compassion opening up, this is what actually makes, this is the subconscious reason that loving kindness practice is so hard for so many of us. If we become loving, compassion, especially now in our world, is right behind it, saying, okay, you're loving and warm-hearted to everything, then you have to acknowledge the suffering in everything and everyone, and that is so much more than an ocean. I mean, it makes the oceans of the world seem small to really cognitively comprehend and emotionally be aware of the amount of suffering in what the Buddha termed samsara, this realm of existence, this dimension of conscious reality. And it is so helpful to think about hypnagogic state, subconscious states, the dream state, and that's a completely different reality where, you know, we can still have the compassion, but we can take it a little less heavy. The only reason we take this stuff so heavy is because we think I am me and this is important. It's like, this is where all spiritual and wisdom teachings say death is the great teacher. You need to spend some time just getting okay with this. All the beautiful experiences you've had, they're not going to go away or stop happening just because you're aware that you're going to die. They're not. But what is going to happen is you're going to open your heart a little bit. You're going to cherish things a little more. You're going to cherish people a little bit more. And you're not going to hold on so tight because the game's already over. This world is... And this routes into your own personal beliefs, which I'm not going to talk about. Whether you believe you go on or don't go on beyond this life, it really is irrelevant, because being the greatest human being you can be means your ability to bear these things and move through these things. So especially if you think that this is your only life, you definitely want to achieve the most in this life, then, don't you? And that includes having the heart and the will to see these things clearly, not just intellectually, but emotionally, because real intelligence is when masculine and feminine are balanced. That's why we do this in every religion in the world. All of them do that, and that's why balance. If you're all intellect, it's empty without the emotion. If you're all emotion, then you don't have the reasoning factor to see, how to direct emotion, why to direct emotion, when emotions are good, when emotions are not so good, when emotions are working against you. These things need each other. They need each other because you're not a robot. If you were a robot, it wouldn't matter if things feel good, but things matter mostly to you because they do or do not feel good, and that's all tying into emotion. And what is the function of that? We can come down to, does something cause suffering or does it not? Because we don't want to suffer. We can't help but not want to, and that's what wisdom is. Wisdom is just, is there more or less suffering? If I enter different states of consciousness, and then that allows me to handle things more wisely, that lessens my suffering. If I can change my perspectives, can I be more free and more capable in my life? The answer is yes. So, loving kindness has this compassion right behind it. If we're going to practice loving kindness, the big guy standing behind loving kindness is compassion. Or maybe it's this big, wonderful woman who needs a hug, and we're like, oh God, I'm scared. It's okay. You can do this. You were born to do this. Compassion is a human faculty. It's just that we have to acknowledge it if we want to do metta. If we want to do loving kindness practice, if we want to open ourselves up, there's this compassion. Compassion has got to be balanced. It has to be balanced with the clarity we get from samadhi, from samatha, from calm abiding, from calm clarity, from our investigations, in our meditations, seeing things clearly, seeing things as not as stable as they are, seeing the conditions for things. And being able to let go is a big part, especially with compassion. I always like to say, of all the historical figures, the Buddha, Jesus, whoever you want to talk, Gandhi, like, no one fixed the world. Like, the Buddha was the Buddha, and we still have suffering. Jesus was Jesus, and people are still killing each other. And they do it because of greed. They do it because of these 5 kleshas. They do it because they're too much in the conscious state and not in their heart state and not in their own subconscious. They take things too literally. All of this ball of suffering is built from these things, from essentially ignorance, from not recognizing the complexity of ourselves and not taking the time to investigate these complexities. It would be nice to have nice things, but, if we kill someone or hurt someone or steal that thing from them or lie to them about things and it goes bad, and it always will, because truth will out and all these things, then it's not worth it to do that. So we allow our cravings to make us do things that are only hurting ourselves because we're not taking the time to think, what if it went wrong? What are the possibilities of it going? It's going to go wrong. It just will. And even if it doesn't, even if somehow you were able to hurt and manipulate the world so that you can enjoy pleasure over here, your subconscious mind is going to know where that came from. You will live with shame, guilt, or you will live with defensiveness. You'll just harden into this dead person already, and it's just not worth it to live that way. It's better to live with nothing, which is what the Buddha did, which is what Pythagoras did, which is what Jesus did, which is what every wise person that has ever lived did. They were like, the more I have, the more I can lose, and the more I lose, the more I feel terrible. But I feel great right now because I'm aware, just being a human is actually magical. That's what meditation actually is being human and developing yourself. I have better joy than I do from any of these, pleasures anyways, and that's why these people have so little and don't want a whole lot. And that's something that you have to strengthen if you want 1,000 times more pleasure and joy in your life than everybody else does. You have to earn it, and you have to earn it with nobility, with honor, with dignity, with being truly, viscerally a human being and developing this emotional intelligence, yada yada. So, compassion, back to where we were, leading to the base of infinite space. It is a state of consciousness that is aware of the infinity of space. And this has to do with compassion taking place for existing consciousness, we'll say, any living being, and that those any living beings can be anywhere in space and time, anywhere, and suffering. Our heart reaches out that far because our emotional centers route to our cognitive centers and become aware on that level. That's how, because we need the emotional energy rising up from our body to activate our awareness of the infinite nature of space. The heart does that. Compassion does that because we realize the vastness of this earth and feel deeply, viscerally, all these things. Let that simmer with you, and you can investigate that on your own. Altruistic joy leads to the next higher attainment. And altruistic joy deserves its own description. I'm going to pause this video now. Meet us next time. We're going to extend and hopefully finish this investigation. Might lead into a third episode. This is getting too long though. So I'm going to say thanks for watching. If you've gained anything from this, then please like and subscribe. We could definitely use your help, and we will keep this flowing. You can check out our website for lots of great stuff that is available there. That's stillrhythmguidance.com. We'll put a link to that in the description, and hopefully see you for our next episode.